Hello, and welcome to my review of Roy Wood's Mustard. So, in the run up to Christmas, I was listening to the Now Christmas album, which I picked up early in the year and thought that it was, appropriate time to listen to it, and was listening through the track list, and it just hit me that this song, I Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day by Roy Wood and Wizard, was just spectacularly good, just a fantastic, timeless Christmas song. So I started Googling Roy Wood, looking at his Wikipedia, looking at the various albums that he put out, particularly in the 70s, and was just scrolling through, and then I clicked on this album, Mustard, and just on the Wikipedia, and what struck me about it was how brilliant this artwork is. I thought to myself, even if I don't like the album, maybe I could pick that up at some point, just because I enjoy the artwork so much. It just reminds me of a lot of 70s kids shows, like Mr. Ben, Rainbow, stuff I would have watched on Nick Jr. Classics back in the day. So a couple of days later, the Friday before Christmas, we were looking around Hastings, exploring the old town, which is just a magical place, one of my all-time favourite places, looking around the various antique shops, the bookshops, even getting the odd late Christmas present. And we nearly walked past this one particular shop, but out the corner of my eyes I spotted a sign saying "We sell vinyl," and I just said, there's no way that we're not going in this shop. We have to go and have a look, see what they've got. So I started digging through, and a lot of the usual stuff, nothing too exciting. And then lo and behold, this album comes out, and I was like, oh wow, I literally found out about this album just the other day. So lovely condition, it only costs £7, and it's actually signed by Annie Haslam, which is a lovely touch. She provided vocals on one of the songs, and was engaged to Roy for a little while. And I just thought, that's just brilliant serendipity. I just feel that it was meant to be that I found it there, because I now strongly associate this album and Roy Wood with that place and that time. And very fittingly, Roy Wood did actually play on Hastings Pier, which is one of my favourite buildings of all time. He played in 1967 with his band The Move, and then later in the early 70s with Wizard. So this is a very special album. It's a bit of an underrated 70s gem, to be honest, and I think it's one of the best things I've discovered in recent times. It's one of those albums where as soon as I put it on for the very first time, I was like, whoa, what is this? Roy Wood plays all the instruments on here, and by that I don't mean just conventional instruments like drums, bass, guitar. I'm talking, woodwind, saxophone, of course, various brass instruments. He pretty much plays the instruments of the whole orchestra, or at least makes it sound like a whole orchestra. And rumour has it that when he was recording some of the orchestral parts of the album, he set up chairs in the studio to sit where the orchestral members would be, and then each time he went to record an instrument, he sat in the respective chair that each orchestra member would sit in to get a real authentic orchestral sound, even though it was just him playing all the instruments, which is fascinating to me. And I really do feel like Roy is one of the kind of underrated, forgotten, multi-instrumentalist producers of the 1970s. People always remember Paul McCartney, Stevie Wonder, Prince playing all of the instruments on their albums. Of course, people like Beck and Tame Impala in more modern times. But this guy was doing all that way back then, and I think it's one of the best examples of it. He even designed and painted this amazing artwork on the sleeve, as he did for many of the records back in the day, I believe. I think he went to art school for a bit, which clearly paid off, because his art style is just so fascinatingly unique, and really it's so wonderful when artists put themselves into everything, even the artwork, because it just makes the whole thing so personal. It really is his work coming from his mind. So, what can you expect from Mustard in terms of musical content? Well, it's incredibly diverse and eclectic in its approach, and Roy is really flexing his muscles in all kinds of areas here. The album starts with a rather jolly, albeit slightly uncanny 1940s pastiche of the Andrews Sisters. That classic jazz pop girl group swing sound. It really does sound like an authentic 1940s recording. It's got that sort of old radio jingle kind of feel about it. I think Roy recorded all the harmonies and sped up the tapes to emulate the sound of women's voices. And I'm not exactly sure what they did to process the sound, but it really does capture that authentic 1940s scratchy, low fidelity sound. There are other moments on this album that are just pure Beach Boys worship. There are moments that are pure Brian Wilson worship. Bits of this album remind me of the Wild Honey album by the Beach Boys. That very soulful piano pop with a nice kind of lo-fi homemade sound. You have classical inspired stuff here, like I said, with Roy emulating the orchestra. There are epic ballads, there's a John Bonham inspired drum solo, and probably the best instance of bagpipes you're ever going to hear on a pop record. It really is fascinating to me how he takes all these things he loves and just blends them together so seamlessly. And he wears his influence on his sleeve on this record, whilst still being incredibly unique and a bit of a one-off. There's no one else out there like Roy Wood. You have fantastic standout tracks on this album, such as Any Old Time Will Do and Look Through the Eyes of a Fool, which are just absolute bangers, like seriously good pop songs. It's said that he was trying to achieve a sort of Phil Spector wall of sound type production with this, layering instruments in the studio and just seeing how it goes, just being fairly spontaneous with that. Another brilliant track is You Sure Got It Now, which has one of the most surreal intros, followed by another Andrews Sisters style vocal, and it's really wacky and has a good sense of humour about it. And that's one of the qualities that I really like about Roy Wood and his music. He never takes himself too seriously despite being incredibly creative. A lot of his stuff has a real silliness about it, which I love, and I think it's a shame that more artists, past and present, don't have more of a sense of humour about their work. You know, movies, for instance, can have emotional bits and funny bits, so why can't albums be that way? You know, Roy, an example of his kind of goofiness is that he used to hire really stupid outfits for his band to wear when they went on Top of the Pops, because he just didn't take it that seriously and it was all just a bit of a laugh. I'm in love with this gatefold. We're treated to many wonderful photographs of Roy playing various instruments in and around the studio. I love the illustrations he did, which are a nice touch. It really means so much when the presentation on a record is this nice and this personal. And the whole packaging and concepts for the album is so unique. You know, Roy playing the bagpipes, wearing the mustard lid as a hat. So this particular copy looks and sounds like it's been played very little, which is always a bonus to have such a nicely preserved copy from back when it came out. Upon closer inspection on the front cover, we see a couple of little stickers showing that this was reduced to £1 down from £2.75. And if you look closer, it reads Hannington's. Now, I looked into Hannington's and it was a very large department store in Brighton that traded for nearly 200 years before sadly closing in 2001. So I would imagine this would have been purchased in the late 70s or maybe just some time after the album came out. I'm assuming this must have been an unsold record in the bargain bin back in the day. So someone got a great bargain there with a third of the price off. Who knows, maybe it was in the New Year's sale or something. And the album actually did fail to chart, so I imagine there would be quite a few copies left over from back when this came out. And it is a real shame that it kind of got lost in the sort of rush of Christmas compilations as this album came out in December. And I don't think the record company particularly did a lot to promote the album, sadly, even though it obviously deserved it. You know, it could have been a lot more successful. And this was after he changed over to Jet Records from Harvest. And perhaps they didn't have the resources to be able to do the more kind of mass promotion that Harvest would have had, being backed by EMI, of course.
But for whatever reason, this record just failed to make the charts back in the day, which is a real shame. So Roy Wood has kind of become a bit of an obsession for me over the past month or so. I think the solo albums do contain most of his finest moments, and by that I specifically mean this album and the album before this one, Boulders, which I'll talk about at a later date. I think when he was in the studio layering, I think that's where a lot of his most creative and inspired stuff seem to have come out. So this album was later released on CD in the late 90s and subsequently re-released as a digipack in 2019. And I thought, you know what, this is a brilliant special album. I'll go ahead and pick up the CD version as well. And what we have on the CD version is absolutely wonderful. We have the classic album, of course, in its entirety, but then we're treated to 7 B-sides, or shall I say A and B-sides. See, when this album came out, it was very much in a time when singles and albums were a separate entity. So if you think the Beatles, the Smiths, a lot of their most classic songs weren't on the albums, they were just 7-inch singles. And this album also does that. So it's presented really lovingly on here. We have a separate section which talks about the bonus tracks. So you have Oh What a Shame and Bengal Jig, which would have been a 7-inch single. So that explains there that it's the A and B sides of a single. And you have Rattlesnake Roll, which is just a callback to the classic 1950s rock sound. A little bit like the track he did with The Move, California Man. And then you've got the track Strider, which I believe would have been the B-side to Look Through the Eyes of a Fool, as that came out before this. You know, I put this on and kind of expecting the B-sides to maybe not be as good as the album tracks, but I'll tell you this, it's just a brilliant, fun bunch of tracks. It sort of expands the universe of this album to more stuff, and I just really appreciate that. I'm so pleased these exist. The CD listening experience is just as fun and rewarding as the vinyl experience for me now. So I think this album is really an underrated, overlooked classic album, really. It's a bit of a shame. So if you're a fan of the singles of The Move or Wizard, or if you're an ELO fan even, I urge you to check this album out, because I'm sure there's going to be stuff on there you're going to love. And Roy Wood just seems like a really pleasant chap. I've been watching quite a few interviews with him, and he actually did an interview the day that I found this album, which is another really fitting thing. So it all just came together really perfectly. And I was messaging my friends. I put this on my story, this album, and me and my friends were all having conversations about Roy Wood. So yes, thank you for listening to my review, and stay tuned for more stuff like this. Bye for now.